Good morning. I got my pickup loaded up and ready to head for Bismarck for a Pride of Dakota show out there. Friday noon to 8 and Saturday 9 to 5. I'll be coming to you live from the motel room the next couple mornings, and then on Sunday I'll be back and we'll have worship in Sutton and McHenry with Holy Communion as normal. Today we're going to look at 2 Peter chapter 2, and 2 Peter 2, there's some similarities to the book of Jude, which we've got one more chapter left of 2 Peter, and then we got 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, which won't take very many days, and then the book of Jude, which is just one chapter. So next week we'll, I'm sure, get through all of those. But Jude deals with false teachers and their punishment and what's going on. And just like yesterday in 2 Peter 1, it talked about being aware of false teaching and knowing that if we learn something incorrect, it's very hard to then change and come back to what is correct. So I think it's so important that our children are taught, the true Word of God and to know God, to know Jesus. And if they're taught early in life that, faith or God doesn't mean anything, it's really difficult for them to, come to a different realization when they become older. And it's just like I said, you teach them that 2 + 2 is 5, and if that's what you tell them, it's really hard. And with that example, I had a teacher one year in school that was teaching us sine, cosine, and tangent according to what the teacher had in mind. And we got a book test, and we all did really lousy because she wasn't teaching what was in the book. She told us the book was wrong. But, to this day, if I were to tell you, what sine, cosine, and tangent are, you forget it. Don't listen, because it's still messing with me from having learned it incorrectly. And so 2 Peter 2 is talking about false prophets. And what did false prophets do? They taught people incorrectly. We think of a prophet as someone who is speaking of the future. But a prophet is one who speaks, for God. A prophet many of the prophets were there to call the people back to God. And so some of these false prophets were going around and teaching that in order to become a Christian, a follower of Jesus, you first had to do all of these other things, or that, this really didn't matter anymore, or you could sin as much as you wanted to and don't worry about it. But, this isn't what Jesus would teach us. And so he starts out, false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you. And it's just as true today as it was way back then. I think of the Moonies when I was growing up in the 70s, and David Koresh, and so many others, so that were really got people to believe, and it turned out to be totally incorrect, and so many people destroyed and families destroyed because of these false prophets. And so we're not immune to them today either. It's just like if someone says, well, it doesn't matter what they do over there because it doesn't affect us. Well, if someone over there is sinning greatly and saying that is not a sin, well, yes, it does affect us. And so we're being warned against false prophets and against false teaching, and to be aware, to use our minds, and to, it's just like, if something sounds too good to be true, it most likely is. And I just read a deal this morning about somebody that ordered some lathe tools, and they dragged them all up, and they come, and they're bent and broken and pieces missing, and they were cheap. Yeah, they were cheap. And it's just one of those too good to be true things. So this is what Peter, and when we get to Jude, this is what we are warned about in the Bible many times. And Jesus too said there will be teachers that will come and try to mislead you. And Peter says here, still in verse 1, they will even deny the master who brought them. they will deny Jesus in their teachings. And they will, so they're going to be teaching some stuff that's just totally wrong. And I can't imagine someone that can do that. But if their mind gets convinced of something, if they're so convinced of something that they can't see it any other way, they're going to try to get you to believe that very same thing. And, we'll leave that for right now. And he says, even so, many will follow their licentious ways, and because of these teachers, the truth will be maligned. Licentiousness, that's sexual immorality, and having no boundaries, just anything goes. And adultery and all of these, and he goes on and he talks about here now, he says their condemnation has been long ago and it's not been idle. And then he's using examples from history. God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but cast them out. He did not spare the ancient world, even though he saved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others. And if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction. And there's a lot of discussion about, well, what really were the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah? And because in the Bible, it doesn't really explicitly say, other than one spot, it says, the sins against Sodom and Gomorrah was that they didn't take care of the women and the orphans. If that was the only sins against Sodom and Gomorrah, I don't think that punishment would have been like that, because there were many other cities that were guilty of the same. And so, you can't just separate things out like that. But, he says he made an example of what is coming to the ungodly. And if he rescued Lot, a man of righteousness, greatly distressed by that licentiousness, the sexual immorality, the total lack of concern for proper living, he was, lived among them day after day and was tormented by their lawless deeds. That, and then he says, so if God knew how to save them, God knows how to save the godly today. And it's that promise that, when we draw near to God, God draws near to us. That's a promise that we live, that I live by, and I trust 100% that, the more I become involved in the belief in God, the trust in God, the more I can feel the guiding and the leadership and the blessings that we have from God. And so then now in verse 12, he goes back to some of these false prophets and teachers. He says, these people are like irrational animals, mere creatures of instinct, born to be caught and killed. They slander what they don't understand. And when their creatures are destroyed, they too are destroyed. It's just, they have eyes, it says, full of adultery and souls that are unsteady and hearts trained in greed, and I think about that, you read these stories about these entitled rich that, their parents are so filthy rich that kids grow up with no real understanding of money, the value of money, the value of work, the work that goes into getting something. It's like, this person has a laptop and, just accidentally drops it. Oh, that's no big deal. I'll get a new one tomorrow, But, they grow up with no sense of responsibility, no reality of the value of things. And that also includes the value of other people. And having value for other people, is when we show concern for them. Is there anyone that is definitely identical to you, just like you? No. And so to have that degree of compassion, to understand that, and to then try to interact on those things. He goes on and he uses the example of Balaam, and I love that story of Balaam as he's leading this donkey, and the angels are there, and the donkey sees the angel, and Balaam is beating the donkey and telling him to go, and because Balaam can't see the angel, and finally the donkey speaks, and this is when, but it's just a wonderful Old Testament story. But anyway, this chapter ends with two two quotes from Proverbs. You know, it says, "The dog turns back to its own vomit." I mean, yuck. I mean, it is such a revolting thing to see. And then, "The sow is washed only to wallow in the mud." You know, dogs and pigs were considered stupid, lowly animals. I mean, pigs were unclean for people to eat, and dogs just ran wild, and, you know, they were not a whole lot different than a pig. And, you know, think about this, the pigs wallow in the mud. Just you wash them up, you clean them up, and they go wallow in the mud. I mean, when you get cleaned up, does the first thing you do go out and dig in the garden? Or, you know, no. I mean, when you get cleaned up, you stay cleaned up. But a pig has no sense of it. Of course, you know, there's a reason that they wallow in the mud and get covered with mud, but that's beside the point. But he's saying that when we put aside the sinful ways of the world, we don't go back to them. And that was, you know, verse 21. It would have been better for people who have done that to have never known righteousness, to have never known God, than to abandon their faith in God. You're better off to have never known God than to know him and then come to say, God makes no difference. So the next couple of days, I'll be in a different spot, but I'll be thinking about you. May today be a blessed one for you.